before we get into introducing our awesome speakers today, I want to do our acknowledgement, beginning this webinar by acknowledging that we are meeting on Aboriginal land that has been inhabited by Indigenous peoples from the beginning. As settlers, we're grateful for the opportunity to meet here, and we thank all the generations of people who have taken care of this land for thousands of years. Long before today, as we gather here, there have been Aboriginal people who have been stewards of this place, and I'll acknowledge personally that I'm on the ancestral traditional territories of the Ojibwe, the Anishinaabe, and particularly the Mississaugas of the New Credit, whose territory we're gathering on today. I'm gathering on, you all aren't. This territory is covered by the Upper Canada Treaties. The other thing that I've been wanting to add to a land acknowledgement is that I want to acknowledge that we are, especially in this year, we have been functioning so much virtually. And I think it's very important to remember that the resources we depend on to run the computers, to keep our lights on for the heating and things like that is also taken from Indigenous land, and often not necessarily with full consent and things like that. So we need to keep that in mind, that we are very much still relying on our partnership, our relationship with the Indigenous lands, and we're very grateful that we have access to those. So I'm going to start with one thing. Michael from ChocoSol suggested that I share this with you, and I think as we're learning to do online marketing and we're learning to do better virtual meetings and things like that, I think of a story that I heard from John Harvey, who was the CEO of Co-op Atlantic at the time, overseeing 130 community-owned grocery stores in the Maritimes. And he said to me, you know, we don't hire people not to make mistakes. We hire them to learn from their mistakes. So without more ado, I'm going to turn it over to Chelsea to introduce our speakers and let you all enjoy the session.
Thank you, Sally. Thank you for that wonderful introduction. Again, if anyone has tech issues, you can put in the general chat or message us directly. We'll try to troubleshoot as quickly as we can, and keep our eyes to the chat. And also thank you for everyone writing awesome introductions about themselves. I'm like blown away by everyone that is on the call today, and all your backgrounds, which are diverse and really great. We have across Ontario, and I even saw some in the Atlantic provinces, which is really cool. So welcome, everyone. So getting into our speakers now. So Sarah Bakker co-owns Field Sparrow Farms with her partner Henry, where they raise pasture livestock on 100 acres in Bobcaygeon. She's also the general manager of the National Farmers Union. And she brings 18 years of experience in marketing and fundraising, fundraising multi-million-dollar projects in the nonprofit sector to the board of the local food and farm co-ops for a finance fund. She previously served on the board of the West End Food Co-op as treasurer and the Organic Councillor of Ontario as vice chair. Let's give a warm welcome to Sarah as she provides some education on, I think I'm going to say multiple topics that you'll be diving into in the next 15 to 20 minutes. So I will give you a 5-minute warning and then a 2-minute warning. Okay, Sarah?
Thanks. Oops, and I'm already messing up and going. Okay. Thank you. And you guys can see my screen, right? And not my notes? Perfect. Okay, great. You know, you set these things up and then you never know if they work. So thank you so much. Let me scroll to the top of my notes. I'm going to kind of talk a bit broadly about Field Sparrow Farms, how we started, kind of how we came, our purpose, I guess, and then kind of look at how we break that down into profit. Some of it is not as perhaps, some of it we will, it happens because by happy accident, and some of it is intentionally thought out. And, you know, I've seen some of the names on this call. Some of you, I know you guys are great marketers as well, and we'll have some of this already. So hopefully, maybe when we get into the question and answer, we can talk about that more too. So, and hopefully some of you who are newer, this might be helpful as you think about your own organization and startup. So Field Sparrow Farms was started in 2008. My husband Henry and I rented a property just down the road from our house, and we started with grass-fed beef. We have since expanded to chicken and pork when we bought the farm that we are on right now in 2011. And I kind of came into farming with the goal to feed my family, feed my friends. Like that's always been something of who I am. I grew plants on my fire escape when we were living in cities. You know, that's just kind of where I came to it from. My husband, though, he grew up with parents who had lived through World War II in the Netherlands. His father tells stories about hiding pigs behind fake barn walls to keep them from German soldiers. His mother grew up in Gouda. Her father worked for was a bookkeeper for a cheese company, and she tells stories about them like smearing little pieces of cheese across bread to kind of get that hint and aroma of cheese when they didn't actually have enough cheese to put on their bread. So he kind of grew up with these stories of food insecurity, and his kind of entry into the farming world. He grew up on a farm, I did not, but was also around regional food security and the vulnerability of food supplies, even in wealthy nations. So that's kind of where we, you know, the two kind of people that came together to create Fields Fair Farms, that sort of was our purpose. And you'll notice I haven't immediately talked about regenerative agriculture because while that is deeply rooted in what we do, it comes out of those two purpose pieces, really. So for our farming practices, our name, Field Sparrow Farms, comes from the goal of protecting grassland bird species. We do pastured chicken, which I'm assuming a lot of you know what it means, but basically it means moving chickens outside for the season across pasture. They manure our fields, they provide, you know, which provides fertilizer for our pastures. Our cattle come along behind it, will graze that, there's improved fields. And so we do rotational grazing again for that rest cycle that mimics the buffalo herds, you know, across the U.S. that, First Nations people were doing, you know, years and years before we were here, obviously. And those goals and how we operate, part of that is to mitigate the effects of climate change. So when you talk about food security and local regional food systems, there's two pieces to that. Those actions help mitigate climate change for everybody on this call, you know, even if you're farther down the field or down the road, you know, carbon capture in soil sequestration of carbon, you know, those are community benefits that our farm can provide to our, you know, our world. And sorry, got a minute. And so by also reducing the number of inputs, it means we a little bit less fragile. Certainly with COVID and the lack of access to abattoirs has made us realize that we are a little more fragile than we expected. And I apologize. There we go. But that is definitely, it's the idea is to help reduce that. And with my NFU hat on that I work for, we actually have a research report out called the Farm Income and Climate Crisis Report, which actually looks at how reduction of inputs, especially nitrogen heavy fertilizers, can also actually improve farm income. And so that is all kind of wrapped up into that piece. And then finally, around these purposes, relationship-wise, we started at the farmers market. We built a customer base over 12 or so years. And while it can sometimes look easy, I think, at the farmer's market, it actually has required a lot of work and a lot of knowledge. You have to know your product in and out, how to use it. I take pride in, if you tell me a dish and how it's cooked, because I don't know all dishes, I can try and usually relate a cut of meat that you could use in it. And all of our wholesale customers have come through those relationships. So that's kind of where we were through 2019. And then 2020 hit. And while I certainly don't want to downplay what others have gone through, and I know it has been a very catastrophic year for some, it has actually probably been the best year we've had sales-wise since we started. And I'm getting behind on my slides. So like many, the pandemic came as a surprise. But when I think about why we've had a good sales year, I feel like because of our values, because of how we kind of came into 2020, we were prepared to address the chaos that the pandemic had. So like I said, we had done farmers markets up until March 2019, and literally overnight, we developed a delivery system. It was very haphazard. I was using a spreadsheet and MailChimp and just sending out emails saying, okay, we're going to move to delivery. Tell me what you want. Here's what we've got available. And it was all in spreadsheets, and it was just very, very kind of chaotic on our end. We were trying to, present as professional to our customers, but behind the scenes, we were running around. We have since moved on to streamline it, and I'll tell you a little bit about that too. But that moving to that delivery system it was really the benefit to what made this year so good. So coming out of that, there are some lessons I want to impart that we kind of learned. So owning your data is probably the biggest piece, especially as farmers or entrepreneurs. We had, going into this year, about 400 emails in our database, and we had been collecting them at the farmers market through our website. As much as we could, we would collect them. And so we had access directly into people's mailbox. We do use social media, and I think it is a good tool, but I can't make sure people see what I post. That is all up to the Instagram and the Facebook formulas, and I have no control over that. Whereas I can write exactly what I want, send it in an email, and it at least shows up in people's email box. And then thanks to a mention in a Toronto Life article that highlighted our deliveries, we went to our email address list doubled overnight. Like, I think we're at just under 1,000, which is amazing. So that is all information we have access to that we can then use to market. So that is just really important, I think, is to own your data. Don't rely on other people to track it for you, because even at the farmers market level, I don't have access to those customers if I don't have a way to contact them. The second really big learning piece that came out of this was, don't wait to make it perfect. Again, there was probably about an hour from the notification of when our farmers market was going to close to us sending out an email saying, all right, we're going to do deliveries. I think don't be afraid to try something new, especially in a response to something so unique and overwhelming as COVID. I think you can address those immediate needs, even if it's a messy response. I think people were willing to come along with us because they knew we were trying, they were trying to access food, we were trying to provide them food. And so even if it was a bit messy in the beginning, they were willing to be there and participate. The other thing is, by not waiting, we got that mentioned in Toronto Life. And so that I looked it up for this presentation. We posted about deliveries. 12 days later, that article came out. So that is a really short timeline. If I had waited to make sure my store was up, that I had everything perfectly, I don't know if we would have gotten that mention. And that has been worth tens of thousands of dollars, literally. I haven't done the exact math, but when I look at those sales from March through June when markets reopened, that was a huge win for us. And again, be adaptable, jump in, edit over time. And so we realized, after having done free deliveries for about, I think, 2 months, that it was a lot of work. And we knew that, but in order to make it profitable for us, we actually ended up adding in a delivery fee for our Toronto and Peterborough customers. We still don't have a delivery fee for our Corso Lakes customers who are in our area. Part of that is that community building piece. Part of it is it's cheaper to deliver to them because they are, not as much gas. But that, even, like I said, we haven't really lost customers through that delivery fee either. And I was surprised because I was nervous about adding that piece because it is an added cost. And I recognize that being able to afford meat is not, we're not the cheapest. And so we did communicate about how that was going to happen. But thankfully it was good. And finally, learn how to tell your story. I know your story, everyone on it, your story is going to be different from ours. I don't think I've ever said no to an interview or a webinar. And it's partially because, I'm passionate about our farm and what we do. But I think being able to share that story and contextualize it is really important for anyone who is selling a product with a social, with a social mindset, with an environmental mindset. You need to be able to tell that story. And, my recommendations are prepare as much as you can. If you've got an interview coming up, make some notes about things you might want to mention so that you're not sitting there going, because it can be nerve-wracking. And be honest, but also, and be yourself, because I think that is what people are looking for too. So, but also, again, contextualize and look at the bigger picture. So I've often talked about basic income as, especially in the COVID responses and our response to the pandemic, because for me, again, going back to our purpose and that relationship mindset, I want to be able to feed everyone. I want everyone able to afford the product we grow. And I know we set a rate that is higher than grocery store prices, but that is the reality of how we operate. And so I want, my saying, you've talked to me before, is I don't want to talk about affordable food. I want to talk about people able to afford food. And so setting it within that context, I think is interesting, especially if you're in an interview, because it's a bigger picture piece and not just about your farm, although it can come out of those goals. So just to take a few minutes to look at some of the practical side and the marketing side of what we do. And again, some of you probably already do this, and some of this, it might be new. So our marketing approach has always been relational. It's about, why do people choose us over a grocery store? Because grocery stores honestly are pretty convenient. They're just down the road. They have a wide selection of products. There's often everything you need is in stock. We sell out of stuff. We don't always have everything available. So why are you going to choose us? And so I really need to focus on that.
Sarah, I'm going to give you a 3 or 4 minute warning, okay?
Okay, great. Then I will speed up a little bit. So the main things I do are invite people into our lives and on our farm. So what that looks like is I show a lot of pictures. You've seen a whole bunch of my pictures of what we do. And I try to always, again, I'll have my children walk through the woods. I'll take pictures and share them there. The next piece I do in that is I try to solve their problem. So for me, it's often, what are we going to have for dinner? I don't know what to make. I have picky eaters. I have not a lot of time to make a dinner. So I try to share lots and lots of food pictures to inspire people. It is also obviously a sales tool, because if I have a lot of something, then I try to market that as well. Getting ahead. So that's kind of the piece of what we do. As for local line, that's the store we use. We did move to an online store. I looked for something that was easy for me to use and for my customers. Because we were moving fast, we had to be simple to set it up. And so there was a bunch of questions about how are we taking payment? When is the payment due? Communication with customers, how are your customers getting the product and when? So there's a lot of those questions you need to ask yourself if you're moving to an online system. And finally, just a little bit of practical advice if you're on Instagram or doing any pictures, edit, filter, natural sunlight. We were talking about this earlier before everyone joined the call. My food pictures, I actually put a lot of work into. I try and make sure there's little green things sprinkled on them. And I actually almost always use natural light to photograph them in, because it looks better. I told Sally this earlier. I've done things where I've had leftovers that I knew I wanted to take a picture of for social media. I've made a plate for it. I haven't even heated it up, because I'm like, I'm not going to eat it for lunch. I put it on a plate, run outside, taken a picture in natural light, and I take 10 so that I get one good one. And then I put it back in the fridge for another meal, because I not necessarily want to eat it now. So I have a whole lot of ugly food pictures, but keep playing around with that. Yeah, you'll get there. And I have one last quote to kind of leave out on. And this is actually a quote from Henry, my husband, because he wrote up a little article about our experience in this, in the pandemic. But basically, he says, what I'm seeing now is that farmers like ourselves are stepping up to provide the increased distribution infrastructure that is immediately required to meet the needs of our customers, both new and old. We are benefiting from the relationships we have built over the 12 years we have been in business with our fellow farmers, with customers, and with our farm and market organizations. This is still an emergent reality, and we are working daily to respond to the challenges it presents as we try to keep up with an increased demand for our service without compromising the values we built Field Sparrow Farms around. I'm proud of how we and our colleagues have been managing so far. And that is, I could probably talk more, but that's, I think I'm at my time.
Thank you, Sarah. That was absolutely fantastic. So I will be now sharing my screen for Michael to present. Now, Michael, our very vibrant Michael on the phone. Michael Sacco graduated from York University with a master's degree in environmental studies. Currently, he's the founder and director of ChocoSol Traders. ChocoSol is a learning community and social enterprise that focuses on ecological regeneration and spiritual ecology through the delicious, healthy vehicles of chocolate, coffee, and tortillas. Michael works with farmers directly in supporting ecological forest gardening in Oaxaca and Chiapas in Mexico, Ecuador, and Dominican Republic. Some projects include working to preserve a rare species of white cacao, supporting a private reserve bird sanctuary in the Dominican Republic that is also tied to a carbon crediting system, and supporting seedling giveaways as thank yous from ChocoSol to its many indigenous partners in the jungles of Mexico. ChocoSol is proud to do 50% of its deliveries by bicycle and uses packaging that is 100% compostable and sustainably sourced. The company has a cradle-to-cradle approach, beginning in the forest gardens, extending to the farmers market, and finishing with the ChocoSol Urban Agriculture Project at 1131 St. Clair Avenue West. In addition to running his business, Michael is currently in the process of completing his master's in Indigenous Studies at Trenton University. Let's all give a very, very warm welcome to Michael. Thank you.
Great. Okay, so I was doing a master's in environmental studies on a solar technology, a prototype solar technology. And that solar technology brought me down to Mexico, and nobody really wanted to buy the solar technology. And we were roasting our first coffee and cacao in Oaxaca and in the Lacandon jungle of Chiapas with pure sunlight. And somewhere along the way, after learning how to roast coffee, I was invited to make some chocolate with a Zapotec grandmother in a little village in Oaxaca. And she taught me her great-grandmother's traditional chocolate recipe. And that was my initiation to chocolate making. And what I found out was everybody wanted to eat the chocolate and drink the coffee, but not everyone wanted to buy the technology, even as ecologically sound and beneficial as it was. And so ChocoSol was born. And ChocoSol, at its core, was about ecological regeneration. It started with clean tech, and it really moved into including agriculture. And so today, because my co-presenter is Ms. Sarah Bakker, and because I love the work that she and Henry do on regenerative ag, I wanted to just kind of talk a little bit about that particular question about how ChocoSol is a social enterprise. So the question is, how can chocolate be a powerful vehicle for regenerative agriculture? Well, first of all, the regenerative ecology of indigenous forest gardens is amazing. Many of you have heard of the three sisters, which is the squash, the beans, and the corn. But what many people have not heard of is the three pillars of the forest: the cacao, the vanilla, and the achiote. And that's a really important reference, not just to a specific matrix of plants and polycultures growing together, but of the whole concept of a forest garden permaculture, an indigenous polyculture of the forest that really created an abundance in a cornucopia. And so a lot of the recipes that we develop around our gold medal, world level, and America's level winning gold medal Jaguar chocolate have been around celebrating the ingredients of the indigenous forest garden and really using the chocolate as a vehicle to celebrate that polyculture, and working with amazing indigenous producers and elders and agroecological, community level animators in Oaxaca, in Chiapas, but also in the Dominican Republic and also in Ecuador. But there's another way that the chocolate can be a vehicle, and that is it's a vehicle for that dialogue to happen between the, indigenous and non-indigenous, and intercultural dialogue. And that's something that's really important for us as well. As you go spiraling down in the presentation here, let's go to the next slide here. The food forest is a symbol. And when I say symbol, it's really hard because a symbol is not reducible to a simplified term. So Wayne Roberts in the No Nonsense Guide to World Food talked about how in forest gardens we get food, fuel, and fiber on page 69. Perfect. I was just as I was waiting for this to start, I grabbed it off my shelf here. A multi-purpose, multi-use forest managed as a grocery, a pharmacy, a hardware, and a clothing store without walls provides security for the very people likely to face hunger. Food, fiber for clothes, fiber for building, materials for crafts, fuel, medicine, fodder for livestock. It's a one-stop foraging. The forest garden is a symbol in that sense of that agroecological approach. But from another perspective, cultures and farmers who are willing to plant trees in whose shade they'll never stand, or whose fruits they may never get the full bounty from, are expressing a vision on a different level and a different scale. And that longer term vision of service and the symbol of a tree for that is so important. And it is the basis of that, a resilient polyculture, a resilient permaculture. A forest garden is not just functional, it's also beautiful. A forest garden is not just about a utilitarian approach, even though as useful as we can see it is, providing food, fuel, and fiber, it's also a commons. It's a place where people gather. It's a place where women can be foraging in the forest and their kids are playing alongside of them. I've seen and experienced how it is a teaching place for language and culture in indigenous communities. And, for us, the forest garden is really a powerful vehicle. So Chelsea, you can just kind of like flip through those slides as you see fit, and people can get a sense of that. But I wanted to then just kind of talk about another side of how chocolate can be a vehicle and a powerful symbol for a social enterprise. And it has to do with chocolate as a health food and a medicine. And chocolate, most people think of as a candy. It's not. It is the highest source of antioxidants of any food known to humans. It has over 1,200 chemical compounds. And I just was reading an article before we started this presentation in a neuroscience magazine, fascinating article about how cacao that is high in flavanols, and that is to say that is not overly processed, and that is to say is not subject to high heat and high shear steel cutting, so stone grinding is better, and not subject to vast amounts of time processing, so low time grinding is important, is a really excellent way for brain oxygenation and cognition function. And it's fascinating how cacao really does, for me, the more I research it, the more I dig into it, the more I rediscover, and the more powerful a symbol it becomes. The only thing that will make our chocolate better is continuing to integrate more local, sustainable, and regenerative foods into our chocolates, like maple, to make a forest garden of the North combined with the forest garden of the South chocolate bar. And that's why one of my favorite selling chocolate bars of all time was the Bird Sanctuary cacao from the Dominican Republic, for the migratory Bicknell thrush. We bring the maple together with the cacao and a touch of sea salt to symbolize the translocal birds. And are the birds local to Quebec and Vermont and New Brunswick, or are they local to the Dominican Republic? Or is not the birds migration an example of that, symbolism that we need to look at and understand a little bit more clearly? And how does that connect to questions around food miles and awareness around food miles and cosmopolitan migratory practices, not only amongst nature, but also amongst humans? And so, we also have been working with some amazing farmers in Chatham, Kent, growing hulless pumpkin seeds, doing soil mound experiments. Tomorrow, I'm dropping off 500 pounds of biochar that we made from some waste cacao to Pagonis live bait and soil makers. And we're making a special ChocoSol carbon and nitrogen rich bags, and then we're actually using double waste burlap sacks and creating mounds for a 100 square foot prototype forest garden mound at a little farm in Hamilton. And so we are having so much fun exploring these different things that we can do while using the chocolate as the vehicle, the vessel, the focus, the sharpened point of what we're doing. And like the wonderful and esteemed Miss Bakker, who I'm happy to hear business flourished during COVID, we pivoted in the winds of change ourselves, and we benefited from our customers, the people for whom the custom and the habit of enjoying a good cup of coffee and a delicious, nutritious bite of chocolate, that we are able to share with them in a way that minimizes food miles and minimizes packaging. And we had an excellent year, a challenging and stressful year, and a year full of a lot of uncertainty, but a year that forced us to take 5 years of development and crunch it into one. And, that's where we see ourselves continuing to grow and bringing together sustainable polyculture field crops together with regenerative agriculture, forest garden crops, to make eco-gastronomic chocolate foods in ways that balance the tension of learning and earning of our workers and our supply chain people in healthy ways. And for me, profit and purpose, there is a tension there. There is an irresolvable tension there. And so as entrepreneurs, and I like to think of myself more as an ecopreneur, we have to find balance, and that balance will shift. So, in a company, you have to ask yourself, are you a research think tank or are you a social enterprise? And ChocoSol, I had to realize after about 6 years in, was no longer just a research project. It had to become a focused earning project in which research could play a part. And the value proposition of ecological regeneration and working in an intercultural way with Indigenous communities and cutting out all the intermediaries, those were the value propositions. But then the value production was, we had to find a way to produce that chocolate in a way that respected the matrix of financial fitness demands in order to be viable and successful. Another tension.
4 minutes left, Michael.
Great. Another tension that we had was the tension between creativity and focused productivity. So the creativity is something that really makes this kind of work sustainable for the worker, but having a focused and smart productivity go hand in hand with that is what makes the social entrepreneur successful. And then finally, and this one was a hard one, is we had to learn to balance initiative taking and leadership by example with management and having clear, focused deliverables. And so, ChocoSol for us and the ChocoSolistas has really been a growth mentality learning community that has become a social enterprise organization. And in the future, we see it evolving into two things: the ChocoSol Regeneration Foundation and then the ChocoSol Social Enterprise. But the goal is to continue to find creative and dynamic organizational functional models that allow us to do that. And as I was having a wonderful conversation yesterday with Miss Sally Miller, who was gracious enough to help me work through some ideas and give some encouragement, you know, that sometimes not deciding which form to take and sitting with that question for months or even years can be one of the most generative ways of coming up with these new ideas and these new formats. So if there's anyone listening thinking, I'm onto something, but I really have to make a decision, make the next best right decision. But sometimes holding off on making huge decisions while inspiration and practice continue to kind of lead the way on a daily, that can be really helpful. Because I can tell you right now, if 20 years ago when I started this research in 2000, someone had asked me to come up with a plan, it would never have happened. And so, it's really, in trying to find that tension and that balance between profit and purpose, the fuel has to be your passion and your inspiration and your vision. But you also have to balance that with your daily bread and being focused and being disciplined and having, healthy rituals and financial fitness rituals and organizational rituals and communication tools, and keep on renewing that. Right now we are in the yearly renewal of our working accords and visions. And so with those words, I come back to the words of gratitude, and I come back to, the thing that I think is most important, and that is get in relationship with the land, get in relationship with the food, and get in relationship with your daily work so that it is a vehicle for your creativity. And if you do that, you'll be part of the change that the world so desperately needs. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael, so much for that wonderful presentation. Really quick enough. Sally's now just pulling up the slide of our funders and partners. Always we're showing kindness and gratitude, and so thankful for all these organizations on the board here and all the individuals that have supported the journey of the Fair Finance Fund to date. We absolutely couldn't have done it without everyone. We as well, although we're a nonprofit, we do have to think about our function of profit and purpose to meet our goals. And so we keep a lean organization, and we all work really hard, and we could not do it without our partners and our individuals for all the successes we have to date.